So those are really some initial pieces that would, in some cases, may precede the actual construction. When we get into the actual construction, here are some details for you. As I mentioned already, about 120 miles total. We will start that. We have a fixed point just to the north of Fresno, right about where the San Joaquin crosses in that area. And that's where we'll start the construction. Now that's a very important point. And I need to mention, and we had some controversy, for those of you that follow this, you understand that there was some controversy about starting in these locations. We went from the north of, just to the north of Fresno into, essentially into Corcoran. And that was done for a very, very specific reason, perhaps worth explaining that. The federal government told us that if we're not going to build a whole system, we're going to build a particular segment, we have to have something called independent utility. And what that meant is that since we couldn't fund the whole project up front, there was some concern that we'll build a section of track and that track would simply lay dormant and not be of use to anybody. So what we had to do is go through this initial section, being told to start in the Central Valley, and find a place where we could link up with the BNSF. Because the BNSF Amtrak runs on BNSF, and so if, perchance, we were unable to complete this project, then what would happen is that Amtrak could use our lines, and so we had to link up with BNSF close to our alignment, and really the best point we could achieve that one was just north of Fresno, and we'd link up with the BNSF there. And as we sort of looked further south, and we continue to find points where our alignment comes close to BNSF. So again, should this project go no further than this initial construction, then in fact we could make that all that track available to Amtrak. So there was something independent utility. So an explanation of why we chose these particular sectors. So of this 120 miles of initial construction, what's it going to look like? I've already mentioned this is pretty straightforward, pretty basic construction. I can't give you exact details at this point because, again, remember my caveat, we've not completed our environmental analysis. So somewhere in the range, you can see the majority of it's going to be at grade, double track type of construction. Ted will later on show you some particular alignments, so a lot of earth moving, a lot of horizontal type of work. We will expect to have somewhere in the nature of 15 to 40 miles of elevated structures, viaduct type of structures, and again we'll show a cross section. And then depending upon the extent to which we're at height and elevated structures are at grade, then there'd be quite a few grade separations in that. And so you see some rough estimates of anywhere from 30 to 70 grade separations. And many of you I know have experience in doing these sorts of activities. So that really what it'll look like in terms of the horizontal alignment. We will have additional work though, 2 stations, certainly in Fresno, and Kings Tulare are possible high-speed train stations. I'll show you some details about that in just a minute. I should mention at this point there has been some confusion that our initial plan is to do only the civil construction. We'll put some track on top of that infrastructure, and that really will be it. There will be no systems, no electrification, no signaling, nothing at this point. And I explain how we'll eventually transition from civil construction into our systems construction in just a minute. And also mention at this point, we're not planning to build a heavy maintenance facility. Now we will have to select in the not too distant future, we'll have to select an initial assembly point. And we will have an area where we can assemble our trains and get them started. That may well transition to a heavy maintenance facility, but we have not selected that area yet, and so at some point we will have to make that determination. But that will also be part of the initial construction. So that should give you a pretty good feel for what we're going to do and how you all are going to assist us in doing it, and give you an idea of the sorts of capabilities, the sorts of plans you need to be making to assist us in support of our initial construction. Here's a little bit more detail about the stations. Our plan is that, and here is where we're going to call on our local partners, our communities. Our plan on the stations is to be pretty basic. I think all of you have ridden in a number of these stations, and you know a basic station, you see some of the things we'll have: a platform, a canopy, an area for the public to get onto our train, some very, very basic amenities, nothing particular outstanding in terms of architectural fit-outs, but certainly a functional station. We think the stations are going to be roughly in the order of $200 million each, a 4-track scenario where we come in and onload and offload passengers. Now here's an area where we expect to work very, very closely with our local partners. And we've already been doing quite a bit of that. We've put out guidance in terms of stationary planning. We've provided some funds for our local communities. And the intent is that taking a basic station and working with our local partners, and we could very well build what's commonly called an iconic station. So we're not going to be building any Union stations or Penn stations in Fresno, but if Fresno desires to build an iconic type of program, we will certainly accommodate that and work with them. So that's the intent. Our phase will be the basic construction, but there well may be some more intricate, some more detailed, and some more architecturally stimulating designs. So again, there may be some opportunities for you working with our cities to work with them individually and coming up with both the design and the construction. And of course, that'll have to be integrated and coordinated when we build that. So the stations are an area also that give you some opportunities to work with us. So I've kind of mentioned the timeline already. This is what we're looking forward to, the draft environmental documents sometime this summer, and then the final environmental documents leading to the NOD-ROD by let's call it early 2012. Once we've finished the NOD and ROD, then we will do our right-of-way acquisition at that point and put out RFPs. Our expectation is then sometime in late 2012 we'll begin the actual construction. So that should be enough information now for you to start your planning, to think a little bit about how you're going to do that. I know many of you have been doing that already. We do have a requirement by law that the ARRO funding has to be completed by 2017. Our intent really is our initial contracts will have some of the more complex and timely construction, such as our aerial structures. So those take the most amount of time. So our intent, in all likelihood, will be to come out with contracts for those aerial structures. The at-grade can go a lot faster. So we'll structure our contracts, and Ted will talk about that in his presentation. So we will get those aerial structures up first, and then we'll be coming back with some of the more at-grade, some of the quicker construction that we have. All right, let me talk a little bit. I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. And this is, again, a plan. Remember, I said I'm your friend. I'm going to be as honest as I can. But I can tell you this is going to vary as we go through our planning. So this is a concept at this point, and we'll see as we work with all our partners as to how this lays it out. So I mentioned that we've got $5.5 billion. We're going to build something called the initial construction section. And that's, of course, what it looks like right now. You see that we will build from Fresno, just a little north of Fresno, by the San Joaquin River, and just to the north of Bakersfield. We don't actually reach the town. We'll still be largely at grade. So that's that 120-mile section that I talked about. That section, again, will be simply civil construction, track, subgrade, grade construction. There will be no systems involved in that. At some point, we've got to go back having that initial construction, and again, dependent upon the resources available, we're going to have to obviously move either to the north or to the south. And so we'll continue the construction at this point, and you see there we're showing both a northern and a southerly direction. A northerly direction through the Y up through Merced and into San Jose is a potential, and then south from Bakersfield perhaps into the LA Basin area. Those areas then would, at some point we will have to select what we call the initial operating section. And so having achieved initial construction and done the civil, we'll have to bring in all the systems, the signaling, the electrification, and all that, and eventually bring in, at that point, we would bring in a vendor to assist us in terms of operations. And so at that point, then, we would produce the initial operating section. That will not be the full phase 1, but rather be that first section where we're in fact operating a revenue service train. And the staff is working hard on that. We're going to have to give recommendations in the not too distant future to our board, and we'll have to give a recommendation where our first IOS section will occur. But again, we'll move from that constructed section into an operating segment with all the different systems. So our intent is actually start this system up to have a passenger rail service, to have a revenue service available before we reach our full phase 1 construction. So having gone from an IOS at that point, then we can in fact expand into full up phase 1, where we reach our end states for phase 1 of San Francisco, the peninsula area, into the LA Basin and Anaheim. So that then would complete phase 1. I should mention also that I've discussed already that we are looking at the possibility of phasing our construction in the peninsula and in the LA Basin area. As you know, with the existing track sections there is a possibility of sharing track. And so it's quite possible that before we're able to achieve our independent and our dedicated track, that we would in fact be using our partners in both those sections and running a sort of a combined rail system. I think there's some real advantages to that. It'll it'll link up the two heavily populated areas much quicker, much faster, and I think that will provide benefits to the state of California. So that's an area we're looking at, and those studies are ongoing with our current environmental studies. More to follow on that.